I was always an inquisitive child, always fascinated, always fiddling, always experimenting. Here are just three examples of those experiments and some of the things I learned. As a very small child, apparently I quickly learned how to escape the baby gate that was supposed to keep me in my playroom. This is at the age of about 2 or 3. You found that if you rattled it hard enough at the bottom, it came loose and you could swing it up and crawl underneath. One day while my mum was distracted looking after my older brother, I managed to get under the baby gate, toddle into the kitchen, pull out a chair and climb on it so that I could see into the huge top loading washing machine with an electric wringer on the top that mum had been using. I reckoned I was a helpful child and I knew roughly how this thing worked, so I thought I'd give it a go. I pulled one of the items of clothes off the pile, started to feed it into the rollers, switched it on, and managed to get it working. This was brilliant. I was being really helpful. What I didn't know was when to let go of the cloth as it rolled into the mangle. I'm sure my mum's first thought when she found me passed out, past my elbow in the mangle, that I was a very helpful child. She tells me her second thought was that she was very glad she'd left the tension off. I was unscathed, fortunately, except for a very interesting bruise all up my arm in the exact pattern of the cable knit jumper I was wearing that day, which lasted for about a week. I didn't learn. As an older child at primary school, 8 or so, I was bored sitting in a French lesson, waiting for Madame Peg to arrive in an old prefabricated classroom with very old desks in them. And I became fascinated with these desks. It was a proper old school desk, and pun intended, with a lift up writing surface, an inkwell, and then underneath the big lid in the far right-hand corner was a small hole, presumably for brushing out all of the pencil sharpenings and dust and that kind of thing. I was fascinated by this hole. It was exactly the right size for a small boy to put his index finger into. And as it turns out, exactly the right size to not be able to pull your finger back out of. Especially when you start to panic, because Madame Peg has come back into the room and wants everyone to close their desks and stop being so silly. After a few moments of disbelief and a few minutes of gentle tugging, it became clear that I was truly and completely stuck. Madame Peg went off to fetch some soap, and the child behind me started to whisper darkly about fire engines and chainsaws and amputations. The soap didn't work. In fact, it probably made things worse by making the wood wet. And Madame Peg, a very kind but sort of slightly severe French lady, looked at me with an expression that said, "What idiots small English boys are," and went to fetch my form teacher. My form teacher took one look and decided it was way above his pay grade and went to fetch the headmaster. While we waited, the class around me descended into chaos and laughter, and I burned with embarrassment. One of the boys, my form teacher decided this problem was beyond him and going to fetch the headmaster. While we waited, one of the boys raised his hand and asked Madame Peg, "What happens if David needs to go to the toilet?" This is something I hadn't even thought of, but now was the only thing I could think about. I genuinely began to consider the two alternative lives that led ahead of me. One where I would go through the rest of my life minus a finger or possibly an arm, and the other where I'd spend the rest of my life attached to a desk. The room went silent as the headmaster came in carrying a large hand drill. He had the air of a man who'd seen all this before and simply started to drill small holes all the way around my finger, about a centimeter away from my finger. And then he produced a chisel, to an audible gasp from everyone in the class. He chiseled between all the holes, and finally I was free, although I'd still got a big ring of wood attached to my finger. He produced the chisel again and managed to chisel that bit of wood off my finger, and I was led away, sort of sniveling and burning with embarrassment. My form teacher, a very gruff Yorkshireman, actually called Mr. Chippendale, bizarrely, took me home and tried to explain to my mum what had happened. Apparently he said, "No, we're not sure, Mrs. Braziel, how he did it, and we're certainly not sure why he did it." I didn't learn. Older but no wiser, I developed a fascination for fire, egged on mainly by my older brother. He showed me this brilliant trick you could do. If you take a can of that butane gas that you used to fill a lighter up with, you spray a little bit into a container, put a light to it, and you get this brilliant pop and whoosh of flame. In our living room, just in front of the gas fire, was this big brass old shell case. And the shell case was perfect for this trick because it's a big, tall cylinder, closed at one end, open at the other. Left alone in the house one day, bored, I thought I'd give it a go. But I was going to make a bigger flame than my brother had. I was going to make an even more powerful whoosh. So I squeezed the top of the butane gas into the can and held it down for way longer than he'd ever done it. I don't know if I mentioned that this brass shell was standing in front of the gas fire. I also didn't mention that the gas fire was lit. So as the gas filled up this can, it sort of toppled over the top and found its own flame way before I was ready. I don't really know exactly what happened next. I was lying on my back with ringing in my ears and the smell of burning singed hair in my nostrils. I was fortunately unscathed again. My eyebrows grew back, and I think maybe that time I did learn a lesson. I learned to be a bit more cautious, but I was still inquisitive. Like all good experiments, these led me to some useful conclusions. Always know when to let go, don't stick your fingers where they shouldn't be, and never try to outdo your older brother. Thank you.